will confirm once she's started it. 2 seconds.
Recording is now started.
Good evening. I am Councillor Georgia Harvey, the Chairman of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee, and I am pleased to welcome you to this remote meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel, and this will include the instant messaging. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? I ask that people will know if this will be happening. No? I will now explain how the meeting will be conducted this evening. The role of Chairman will continue, but the Democratic Services Officer will assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. The Democratic Services Officer will produce the minutes and provide procedural advice as required. I will provide further explanations as we proceed through the agenda, but members are reminded that instant messaging will be visible to those viewing the meeting and must only be used for raising technical issues, indicating a wish to speak, raising a point of order, or seconding a motion. I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to take the attendance register by reading out the list of committee members in alphabetical order. Members should confirm their attendance by answering present.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'll now take the register. Councillor Atkinson.
Present.
Councillor Brindle.
Present.
Councillor Cox.
Present.
Councillor Cumming.
Present.
Councillor Daly. Councillor Daly? Okay, we'll come back to that. Councillor Fissenden? Councillor Harvey?
Present.
Councillor Perry, I believe, will be arriving later on. Councillor Round? I have seen Councillor Round, so yes, he's here. Councillor Cooling?
Yes, present.
And Councillor Titchener?
Present.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the list of officers present and which items they are presenting as appropriate.
Thank you, Chairman. This evening we have Rich Clark, Head of Audit Partnership, Anna Collier, Policy and Information Manager for item 13. We have Ellie Dunnett, Head of Finance for item 15. Mark Green, Director of Finance and Business Improvement for item 16. Paul Holland, Senior Finance Manager, Client, which I think will mainly be for item 15. John Owen, Finance Manager, item 14. Debbie Stuck, that's me, Democratic Services Officer. Angela Woodhouse, Head of Policy, Communications and Governance, item 12. And we also have Paul Dossett and Tina James of Grant Thornton, the External Auditor. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. On to item 1, apologies for absence. I now ask Democratic Services Officer to read that list of apologies received.
Thank you, Chairman. We have received apologies from Councillor Perry, who will be late in arriving at the meeting. Thank you.
On to item 2, substitute members. I now ask Democratic Services Officer if there are any substitute members. I don't believe there are there?
I understand that Councillor Garton will be substituting for Councillor Perry until his arrival. Could
That is
Councillor
correct.
Garton? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Item 3, urgent items. There are no urgent items this evening.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. Sorry, I've just been updated by Councillor Fissenden, who is on her way, but she just had to take her daughter for a COVID test. She's 5 minutes away from home and then will be joining us. That's all I can find out at the moment about my other 2 members. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4, visiting members. I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to read that list of visiting members.
Thank you, Chairman. We did have a notification that Councillor Harper may be here as an observer, but I can't see him in the list at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers this evening? No, perfect. Item 6.
Mike Cumming.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I'm not sure whether this does require a disclosure, but my son works for PricewaterhouseCoopers, who Grant Thornton have consulted as auditor's expert on actuary figures. My son doesn't think that I need to disclose that because he doesn't work in that department, but I thought just to keep the record straight, I would mention it.
Lovely. Thank you for letting us know. Mrs. Snook, do we need to do anything with that?
I don't think that represents a disclosable or OSI on this occasion. So I think we'll just make a note of that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, both of you. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Does anyone have any disclosures of lobbying this week? No. Item 7, to consider whether items should be taken in private. I move that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed. Item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of September 2020. This is on page 1 of the agenda pack. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of September be approved as a correct record. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
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 Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We'll sign the minutes at a later date when I can finally see Miss Nook in person. Agenda item 9, questions and answers, members of the public. There are no questions this evening. Agenda item 10, questions from members. Again, there are no questions this evening. Agenda item 11, committee work programme. This is on page 10. I'll give members a chance to turn to that page. Members, are there any questions on this?
Nope.
Yeah, Chair, can I just suggest, let me just get to the page. It might be useful if we include in there a report on the effect of Brexit, because by the 15th of March meeting, we would have totally left the EU for 2.5 months. So it might be useful to have some sort of report on that, see if it's affecting Maidstone Council in any way. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Collins, did you also want to come in on this? I've just seen you message in the chat.
Very kind of you. Thank you very much. I suspect that Rich will well and truly correct me on this, but I worry that I don't see over the next few months any particular audit of contract management. Yet again, I harp on about this, but we're silent on contract management, and we're also silent on the impact of the exceptional work practices which have been in place. I'm not saying they're good or bad. Exceptional work practices have been in place over the past 7 or 8 months. So if Rich can assure me that the normal course of internal audit, I have nothing to worry about. Otherwise, should there be contract management and an impact of exceptional work practices in this work programme? Thank you.
Mr. Clark, do you want to come back on that? Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. I can assure Councillor Cooling that we are working through the plan that members agreed in September. We do not at this point anticipate doing specific work on contract management, but it will obviously form a part of our analysis of every certain that contains a contract. Similarly, with revised working practices, they will form part of our work in each individual piece of work that we undertake. We will be reporting next to members in January with an update of our findings up to that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cullen, do you want to come back on that at all?
If I may, in terms of contract management, if the current exceptional circumstances which have very adverse impact on certain private sector companies, if there are any concerns about any of the significant suppliers of services or products to the to Maidstone Borough Council, should the situation be examined as a matter of priority? I'm thinking perhaps particularly of waste management services, but again, I sit here to be corrected by Rich.
Thank you. And Mr. Green, are you able to come back on Councillor Atkinson's point, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd suggest to Councillor Atkinson that because we have risks relating to Brexit, both on the budget risk register that this committee considers and also on the corporate risk register, which goes to Policy and Resources Committee, that there's a mechanism in place for monitoring the effect of, for example, a disrupted exit from the existing trading arrangements with the EU. So I don't see that we necessarily need a separate report on this subject, given that it's already covered elsewhere.
Well, I'm not so sure, because I think the public would like to know how it's affecting Maidstone, and a brief report on that would be very useful, I think. And also going back to Councillor Cooling's comment, in the minutes of the last meeting there was something about contract management. It's been reported to members, it says here, as a separate item because it had received an adverse assurance rating. So I'd agree with Councillor Cooling that should be included, but I still think that a brief report on the effects of Brexit would be useful for the committee and for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. Apologies, everyone. We've got two slightly crossed wires here with the two discussions. Mr. Clark, do you want to come back on the points that relate to you, and then we'll come back to the Brexit discussion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, to take Councillor Cooling's point, obviously the waste management contract is a significant one that might be affected by any number of current issues, Brexit and COVID. We currently have a piece of work looking specifically at waste contract management that's due to issue.
Has Rich disappeared?
Yeah, he has, I think. So, yeah, he has.
Okay, we'll carry on until Mr. Clark comes back online. Mr. Green, is there anything you want to come back to in response to the Brexit points made by Councillor Atkinson?
Yes, I'm still not convinced, I'm afraid, Councillor Atkinson. I mean, maybe could we have a discussion outside the meeting? And clearly I'm very happy to help members with briefings or anything else. But if you'd be happy to discuss it outside the meeting, we can explore how to deal with the issues that are concerning you.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooling, we'll come back to that discussion point when Mr. Clark comes back online. But just to keep things moving, Councillor Cox, I've seen you've indicated to speak.
Yeah, I just really wanted to back up our officers here, and I know that even if we, when we attempted to see what was going to be happening in the first time, and I can't even remember what those dates were. It's so many times we've been looking at coming out of Brexit, etc. That in our sort of work continuity, looking at all the services, we've done the work on this. We've anticipated what's going to be happening. And I think those service, or the heads of those service, have everything ready. The reason why I can sound so assured to us all is look what happened when COVID hit and we had to work from home. This had been practiced and it had been, everything was catered for. It swung almost seamlessly into us working from home. So I would back up what Mr. Green is saying with the fact that this has been looked into. But I think this will be very apparent if there are going to be things that go wrong. And you are correct. It is looking, the biggest threat is potentially to waste management. But I think let's almost get there, because it hopefully may not be as bad as we're all coping for, but you know where you were when I said that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to try Mr. Clark. Are you there? Can you hear us? No, that doesn't sound very positive. Councillor Cooling, what we'll do is I'll move on, and then at the point Mrs. Clark...
Excuse me, buddy. I'm entirely relaxed. I heard the first part of Rich's response, which I think is reassuring. So I'm quite happy to move on. And like Councillor Cox, I think making a statement, I think Brexit will be far smoother than we're all feeling. Let's move on.
Excellent, thank you. In that case, then, members, are there any other comments on the committee work programme? No, in that case, then I'll take it as read and we'll move on to agenda item 12.
I'm sorry, Chairman, just before we do move on, we have now got Councillor Fissenden and Councillor Daly in the list of attendees. Can I just double check when they actually arrived into the meeting, if they could confirm that, and whether they've got any disclosures of interest or lobbying, please?
Oh, hi, it's Councillor Fissenden. No lobbying, and I joined at 35 minutes to.
Thank you. And Councillor Daly?
Just a few seconds after that, and I have nothing to declare.
Thank you.
Can I just mention something, Debbie? It's Martin Round here. I've been in and out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now turn to item 12, the annual governance statement. This is on page 11. And I call upon Angela Woodhouse, Head of Policy and Communications and Governance, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good evening, committee members. So the committee received the latest annual governance statement in July this year, not 2019. So apologies for the error on the report, for those of you that spotted it. This report outlines progress against the action plan agreed in that statement. 9 risks were identified following the review of governance, and progress has been made across all areas. I'll pick out a few highlights as I trust the committee have read the report. One of the biggest risks identified was ensuring the financial risk resulting from the impact of COVID-19 was managed. The Policy and Resources Committee have been considering this matter regularly through quarterly budget reports and monthly updates on the emerging medium-term financial strategy and the refresh of the Council's strategic plan actions for the next 5 years. With regard to exit from the EU as another action identified in the plan, as we were discussing earlier, we are participating in regular Kent Resilience Forum meetings to plan and prepare for transition, and we are represented at these by the Emergency Planning Officer and their Deputy, plus the Head of Transformation and Property and the Director of Finance and Business Improvement. The capacity to deliver the investment and regeneration programme is a priority for the Director of Regeneration and Place, and their update outlines actions that have been taken to ensure staff have capacity and the skills to deliver the programme, as well as seeking support from external specialists when needed. I'm happy to take any questions members may have. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Excellent, thank you. Members, are there any questions on this particular item?
Madam Chairman, I've just got one question, if I may. Councillor Titchener here.
Yep, go for it.
On page 15, it says, I'm looking at Appendix A, that the financial risk of the impact of COVID-19, it says monthly reports are given to the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. I just wanted to know if these reports are open to the public. I can't find them.
Can I refer that to Mark Green, please?
Yeah.
Yes, certainly happy to take that. The reports aren't generally published. They are summarised by the LGA, for example, who provide summaries. And so far as Maidstone's return is concerned, although we don't publish the whole return, which is quite a bulky document, we do give details of the highlights in our quarterly financial monitoring returns to Policy and Resources Committee, because they do give a good snapshot as to how the Council is doing in relation to the financial pressures of COVID-19. So basically my answer is, if you want to see how Maidstone is doing, look at the quarterly reports to Policy and Resources Committee is concerned. So far as the national position, the LGA do summaries of all the authorities that submit copies of the MHCLG returns to them, and that gives a flavour of how authorities across the country are doing. So I think there is actually quite a bit of information out there.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cooling, have you got a question?
Yes, I have, please. on page 15 again, the award and record, but management of contracts, I see on the update that contract management is a recognised specific skill set. That's good. It refers to checking the resilience of the contractor and also the financial performance. But with service contracts, a key is actually quality of service as measured against certain criteria. So could I please suggest that the actions are assigned somewhere or other to ensure that contract management undertakes a monitoring of quality of service as well as the money side of it? Thank you.
Thank you. Who's best to respond to that particular comment?
I'm happy to take that, Chair. There's a reference in the report to the Council's contract management toolkit, and it's absolutely, as you say, Councillor Cooling, it's not just the PIs, it's also the quality of the contract delivery, and that's something that we're very keen that contract managers take on board as part of their monitoring. I'm happy to kind of provide extracts from the toolkit to demonstrate that we do take that seriously, but I can assure you that it's absolutely something that that we pay attention to when managing contracts.
May I come back on that, Chair?
Of course.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. I had occasion maybe a month, 2 months ago to take a look at abstracts which were passed to me of the waste management contract. And one particular aspect of service, there were no measures, no criteria of judgment, whether it was good or bad. So please, I'm sure the toolkit is good, but I'd ask you don't need to come back to me or anything like that. Could we please run a double check that the toolkit includes every manager putting out a contract for products or services has in there a few criteria by which the quality of the product or service is going to be judged, and if the supplier falls short on those, there should be certain degrees of, shall we call it, financial recompense. So please, no need to answer directly, but I'd appreciate you taking a look to check the toolkit. Thank you.
Thanks, noted.
Thank you. Councillor Garton, it's your turn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Page 16, I see record of processing activity, updated CCTV. Forgive me if I'm only a substitute member here and I'm very often on this committee, but what is the latest stage with the CCTV in the town centre? And I see the actions here are progressing rather slowly to be delivered by March 2021. If we are already providing the our CCTV feed to the bid, obviously this needs to be cleared up as a matter of urgency, just to make sure that we are on the right side of the law, so to say. Forgive me if I was already breaking into the next item, which is item 13. I think there's a cross-cutting implication.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. So I feel this might be a bit cross purposes. So the activity here is about ensuring we comply with the requirements of data protection legislation. So we conducted a review of our CCTV, as in across the council. So we're talking body worn cameras, CCTV we maintain and look after and manage or are responsible for. And a number of different actions were identified. And really what we're trying to flag up to you is we took action at the time. We had a number of things outstanding to deliver, and then the pandemic hit. So we are now picking that up and dealing with those remaining actions, but there aren't big issues of concern. And as you rightly say, it is picked up again in the next item on the agenda, where we talk about planned actions. But I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that from the officer side.
Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much for that answer. Yes, the feeding the pictures to the bid, I believe, was also delayed due to the pandemic, etc. But I think it is now, I'm not entirely familiar because I'm neither on the Chief Committee these days, but it is my understanding that the feeding is either to start shortly or has already commenced. So, I'm just concerned about the legal implication for making our CCTV available to a third-party body, which obviously needs some enhanced oversight, especially since we are a public body. Thank you very much for that answer.
Well, I could clarify a bit further, Councillor Garson, because if we would carry out a full data protection impact assessment, and there would be appropriate then risk mitigation and appropriate legal contracts in place, and that actually has happened with this. So we actually brought in external support to make sure it was all done, because we didn't have the resources in-house to do it, and we actually did that when they looked at the changes being made to the CCTV. So I can assure you that has happened on this one. And you're right, it's really important, we need to get it right. So we did actually bring someone in, and we did go through all that when we come up with the new contracts. So that's a really important point. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very reassuring. Thank you.
Members, has anyone else got any questions? No. In that case then, we turn to the recommendations on page 11, and this report is for noting. Members, is it noted?
Noted. Noted.
Noted.
Excellent, thank you. Turning now then to agenda item 13, the Data Protection Action Plan. It's a progress update, it's on page 21, and I call upon Anna Connolly, Policy and Information Manager, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This report is an update on the progress against the action plan originally implemented in 2017 in preparation for the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act. It also provides an update on key national changes in data protection since the last report, and includes examples of the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, applying its powers. We briefly updated members at the start of the year that the Council is advised to consider data protection as part of preparations for exiting the EU. An audit has been undertaken of nearly all systems, and these are identified as being based in the UK, so compliant. The location of a couple of small systems have not yet been identified, but these are not at all high risk and will be resolved before the end of the year. One notable change since our last update is that the ICO have produced an accountability framework, including an accountability tracker, to enable organisations to review their own arrangements and create plans for compliance and improvement. Accountability is one of the key principles in data protection. It requires that you comply and demonstrate your compliance with data protection legislation. The accountability supports organisations to minimise the risk to personal data held by helping you put in place appropriate and effective policies, procedures and measures. The accountability tracker itself, which comes with the framework, it has 10 theme areas. It's quite comprehensive and lists activities that the ICO would expect to see if they were to visit your organisation and audit it. We undertook a self-assessment of Maidstone's arrangements this year, and the scores are set out at 2.14 of the report. As a summary, just over 50% of the activities are in place and would meet expectations of the ICO. Just over 30% are in place, but we consider to be partially meeting expectations, and just under 10% are not in place or do not meet expectations. Areas that we are particularly, or we consider ourselves to be particularly strong in, are leadership arrangements around data protection. There are clear roles and responsibilities held both strategically and operationally by officers. Staff have had training across the organisation and know how to take account of data protection in their roles, and processes like rights requests are managed properly and in a timely way. Some of the areas for improvement, though, are around documentation. We need to update policies and privacy notices. We worked very hard to get these documents in place, and there's quite a lot of them for 2018 to ensure we were compliant. And so now they do need some refinement in order to meet best practice. We need to get more information on our website and to publish more about what we are doing in the back office or behind the scenes, and we need to have more things clearly documented, like our timings for updating documents and for undertaking reviews of a record of processing activity. This isn't to say these things aren't happening, but we need to have very clearly documented when we are intending to do them and when we have done them. The 9% of activities that do not meet expectations equates to around 28 activities in the the accountability tracker itself. None of these are high risk areas, which should be a cause for alarm and can all be mitigated. The only area which has limited mitigation is around the question that can your organisation deal with any increase in requests or reduction in staffing levels. Resources are already quite limited on data protection, and as a mitigation over the next year, more of my team will be receiving training on different aspects in order to ensure some of that resilience, but day-to-day resource in itself is limited. With regards to the action plan, which has been in place since 2017, at the last committee meeting we presented it, there were 3 key areas discussed as being outstanding. These were updating the asset register, implementing actions from the CCTV review when it was completed, in implementing actions from the record of processing activity review when that was completed. The ROPA and CCTV review were completed in February. Due to the pandemic, progress on those remaining actions, though, were paused. Resources in the policy and information team who would have implemented that, my team, redeployed in a number of areas over the lockdown period, and our work on data protection had to focus on ensuring necessary actions were taken to respond to the health crisis, and that what we were doing was secure and appropriate. Actions have on the CCTV review have started to pick up, but it has been slow because it's pulling on resources from across the council, which has obviously had focus in other areas and responding to the pandemic. But we have got policies now, they are developed and they are in draft, so we will be looking to focus on that in the immediate future. A new action plan has been developed, and these are the actions from the last action plan plus actions from the self-assessment that we completed. So it does kind of more resemble the plan that we started with back in 2017, albeit we have a lot greater understanding now, and it's more about refinement than starting new. The focus over the next 6 months will be immediately on completing those actions on the CCTV and finalising the work on exiting the EU, and then on updating existing policies and documents so that they are in line with best practice. Early next year, the focus will be on developing a new training programme for staff, which is appropriate to the different roles within the organisation, and implementing a new programme of information audits to develop the information asset register and ensure services have appropriate processes in place. Sorry, I know that was quite extensive, but there was quite a lot to cover there. I'm happy to take any questions, and obviously Angela Woodhouse is here as well.
Thank you very much for that. Members, are there any questions?
Yeah, Chair, can I wade in here whilst Councillor Cooling is still typing? It was a very full explanation. It was really good. I've only got a suggestion, really, that we should put something on the website to the fact to say that we are aware of data protection and that we're working on our policy, but I think the public would like to know that we are fully aware of our responsibilities. I don't think there's anything on the website currently, so just a brief note to say that the council's working on it might be helpful. Thank you.
We do have a page or a number of pages on data protection and including privacy notices. We do have to have that to comply with the law, so that information is all there. The kind of things I was referring to were ideally, you would have documents such as your risk assessments that you complete before new systems are implemented or changes of processes. So it's that kind of additional information that we would be looking to get on the website. But there are pages on there with the council's policy and other policies, plus our privacy notices.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Garton.
Yeah, I sort of disagree slightly with Councillor Atkinson to put a note in saying, well, we're working at it, but we're not quite ready yet. That sort of always invites people to say, well, we are a soft spot, sue us if you want to. At 2.8, you actually quite clearly pointed out that British Airways has been fined and Experian as well. What is the risk of us getting fined on anything, because we are not quite there yet? If I look in the appendix, there are quite a few issues which are planned, and we're already past the anticipated completion date, obviously because COVID, and it's all appreciated and perfectly acceptable that we get delayed on this one, but it is nonetheless an issue of concern.
So to be clear, and possibly I've sent the wrong impression, we are compliant. So there are areas where we might need to improve, but we did everything that we needed to do in order to ensure we were compliant prior to the Data Protection Act coming in 2018. So sorry if I've said any kind of hairs running, that we are compliant, but these are things that we can do to improve. Now, what the ICO will look for is that we are an organisation. So if they picked up if we didn't do something that we should do, or if we if they didn't perceive that we had very clearly set out what our kind of rules and how we were adhering to the data protection, or we mishandled something, what they would look to see is that we had a clear plan in place and that we take seriously our accountability. So the fact that we report to you annually on this, the fact that we have a member of this committee which sits on our information board to ensure that we have that oversight on what we're doing, the fact that we have a clear action plan in place would be everything that the ICO would want to see. So we are taking that seriously. If they pointed out to us that we weren't managing something the way we should be and that we built that into our plans, then they would be content with that. I think the incidences where they are fining is where the organisations do not take it seriously, or they do not recognise that accountability, and that's where they will put a fine in place. Now, Councillor Garton, I will double check the appendices. There shouldn't be anything on that new appendices which is out of date, but I may well have put in a cheeky 2020 instead of a 2021, and that's not beyond me. So I will go back and refine that, because everything in that new plan should be looking forward, albeit I realise the work around CCTV obviously has gone on.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example here, we've got job descriptions for MG, AW, ACOS, and LC need to be updated. And well, yeah, it's start date is only today, but it's supposed to be updated by the end of the month. So there were a few others which were 30th of 11th, I think, which I looked at. But yeah, it's quite understandable, and as long as we do the best we can, and obviously we can't do as well as we wanted to because of all the COVID delays. I think that what you say, the ICO will be quite happy and reluctant to find somebody who's tried but gets hindered by circumstances beyond their control, obviously. Thank you for that answer.
Thank you. Councillor Cooling.
Thank you very much. On page 26, the table you've provided there, and by the way, I thought this was a very comprehensive report. Well done, a lot of work, well done. I've actually sort of numbered them in my own mind, but I've got comments on 3 of them. Firstly, the 6th one, which is at the bottom of page 26. I think my eyes light up whenever I see processing activity. And so presumably, if there are any actions that are arising from the Europa that relate to the processing of resident confidential information, or indeed your employee information, I'm guessing that will receive very rapid attention. Then over the page, number 7, the one at the top of the table there, the procurement process. Yes, data protection clauses in procurement contracts are boilerplate these days, are fundamental. So it should be, I would have thought, pretty quick and pretty easy to require that the procurement process takes full account of data protection obligations, mutual data protection obligations. And finally, 2 further down, my number 9, penultimate one, use of social media and logs. Well, let's not talk about the BBC or anything like that, but then system access to be as well documented. I'm not certain what is meant by system access there, but if that is access to your back office systems, then surely that is tightly controlled by ICT with management in full support. So I just draw attention to those 3, which I think stand out, but basically I think a very good report and well done. Thank you.
So the record of processing activities, that's a requirement from the ICO. We have undertaken 2 reviews since it was developed for 2018. So that's, I think, good. That's once a year, and we're about to embark on it again. The whole point of undertaking the audits to develop the ROPA is you go through that process of reviewing people's personal information, how we collect people's personal information, and ensure that is well documented. So the ROPA requires you to very clearly set out what information you collect, what's your legal basis for collecting that information, how you ensure that information is securely kept, who has access to it, if anyone is required to have access to it, like a third party, or you're required to share it with government or something like that. And we have to clearly document that. So we have done that. We've done that twice. And following undertaking the self-assessment, we've identified a few bits where we want to tighten up, and it is literally tighten up. I think I said in the report we've taken a very risk-averse approach to doing this because we don't think it was worth doing anything else. If you're going to do it, then be hard on yourself and make sure everything is very tight, belt and braces approach. So we're going to go through that process again just to make sure that is fully refined. In regards to the work with procurement, there was a lot of work done with procurement initially back in late 2017, early 2018, but we didn't have a lot of guidance from the ICO. There was across the board when you talked to other local authorities, and myself and Angela Woodhouse attended a lot of events. there wasn't a lot of guidance around the procurement angle, and it wasn't all quite clear. So we need to go back and we need to revisit that with them and make sure that is well embedded in the service and is being picked up. And it may well be that my team need to be involved in some of the early conversations with services to get them thinking about the right things when they're talking to procurement. So that's what that part's about. And then finally, in terms of back office systems, you are right. We are very tightly controlled with ICT, but some services obviously control the rights to access to the systems internally amongst different members of their teams, and it's about making sure that those logs are as well kept as the ICT logs. So it's consistency across the council is what we're looking for with that part. Hopefully that's explained things, but do let me know if any of that didn't make any sense.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Brindle.
Sorry, I was just undertaking that well-known Maidstone local activity of chasing your mouse around the place. Thank you very much, a very comprehensive report. I just, looking at the action plan, and Councillor Gardner has asked some of the questions I wanted answers to. I have noted, especially with the short-term revised dates, can you just advise whether you have any ongoing concerns about completing this valuable and necessary work within the timetable you've set, especially given COVID, Brexit and anything else that might come down the line to hit us?
So some of those tight dates, we have started work already, to be clear, on some of those. So I've only said whether immediate, where I know that we can deliver those immediately. Yes, because there are concerns. My team is multifunctional. We cover a number of different areas, and we do get involved in supporting around things like the community hub and the work around COVID, and may well be required to support in other areas as well. So that is always a concern. We have been ambitious with that timetable, so then we may have to relook at some of the dates if other challenges or priorities come along. But my concern would always be setting too far in the distant future just means that you can delay and put other priorities in place, and it is important that we do get this done. If we needed to, we'd have to come back or to revisit and look at what's possible, and we do that through the Information Management Board, of which Mark Green is the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, obviously we're looking at this report from the department that spins many plates and keeps them all usually up in the air. Where I think you might be being let down, I was looking at what Councillor Atkinson was saying. If you indeed put GDPR in our marvellous search bar, it comes up with absolutely, and this is just an approximate, 0 cases of it across our website. Yet when I put in the heading from this report, luckily it did then bring me to, I put in data protection action plan, and if I scroll down to the heading that it took me to, data protection, at the bottom of the page it actually says Maidstone Borough Council services comply with GDPR, and you can find out more about this list of services here. Why on earth then can't our search engine even find where we list GDPR? Because it's letting you down, because people would go and look for, I wonder how they comply with GDPR. So I think you need to go there and knock some heads together, not unusual, and we might then be able to show general members of the public and even our own councillors where to look for what we're looking at now. So that's not on your head. It is just on our marvellous search bar that seems to bring up 53,000 mentions of things that you don't really want it to, and none where you put in GDPR that is in fact on our website, but only listed. Just a review, if you could, of that question I have. Can it be done?
I'm guessing so, but I don't know because I'm not a website wizard. I can ask. But what I would say is technically with the exiting the EU coming up, we won't comply. It won't be GDPR anymore. And I think we've always built it with a focus on the Data Protection Act because that's what we will have to comply with. But you are right, that's me or we meaning me and Angela, being very technical, I guess, because most people would refer to it as GDPR, but what we have to comply with is the Data Protection Act. But I have heard that they're going to be calling it GDPR-UK. So I will ask the web team whether that's done. It can be done in some way, but I couldn't tell you.
I think we should be taking the information that people are searching. So if absolutely nobody ever searches for GDPR, we should stop using it in the website, because then we can't have a section that's GDPR, because if people are going with data protection and they understand that, then that's fine. But I think on everybody's tongue at the moment, because they don't understand necessarily that we're going to lose GDPR when the 31st of Armageddon starts. I take your point. It was just really backing up because I looked at what Councillor Atkinson was saying, and I too couldn't find a thing if I put GDPR in. Thank you.
Councillor Cox, if I could just come in, I think you make a fair point. It's the fact people use the two terms interchangeably, so we need to have all of it come up regardless of which term you search. So we'll take that back to digital and get it sorted. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Councillor Daly.
Madam Chairman, if I just may butt into that, because I put on the IAM. Councillor Cox, you may remember that we raised this question with the Chief Executive last week in a different meeting about the website and pages being constantly changed on the website and very difficult to find on occasion as well. Maybe you want to reiterate that with the Chief Executive next time you meet her, since you are the leader of the Council. And this has now been mentioned, the website has been mentioned on two meetings where we were both present.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. As I am the leader of the council, I will bring that up. Thank you.
Chairman, before we go any further now, I have just noticed that Councillor Perry has joined the meeting. So he is now the full member. And we'll have Councillor Galton, I think, will take the role of a visiting member. Thank you. No.
Chairman, did you call me to speak, Dan Daly?
I did, Councillor Daly, but we were finishing off the last item. My apologies to Councillor Garton for missing you off the chat.
Well, it's all right. Before I go to sleep completely, I don't want to. Anna made a statement which I found quite interesting, actually. I thought that having once signed up to this thing called GDPR, that would be it. And I'm not quite sure how we, by Brexiting, get away from GDPR. I would like to think we're going to get some benefit from Brexit, but I don't think GDPR was one of them, actually. I'm bemused by it.
Yeah, me too.
Was that amused or bemused?
Could be both. It depends on my mood.
Okay, so the GDPR, trying to find the way to. So the reason we have the Data Protection Act 2018 is that is how we brought that into law in the UK. So the Data Protection Act is essentially GDPR, but our version of it. So we keep it absolutely 100%, and we need to keep it as a country in order to be able to process data backwards and forwards between us and other countries. So it's phrasing, but it's essentially the Data Protection Act for the UK. That is the same rules that within GDPR, with some small additions of our own.
Chairman, how terribly British.
Terribly.
Thank you. Mrs. Snook, do we need to get Councillor Perry to disclose any potential lobbying?
Yes, Chairman, I think we do.
Thank you. I haven't been lobbied on any of this, so none of the items.
And you have no disclosures of interest either?
No disclosures of interest, no.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Are there any other questions? No. In that case, then we turn to the recommendations on page 21, and you'll see this report is for noting. Members, is the report noted?
Noted.
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 Excellent, thank you very much. Members, we now turn then to agenda item 14, Treasury Management Mid-Year Review 2020 to 2021. It's on page 36, and I call upon John Owen, Finance Manager, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review. The Council adopted SITFA's Treasury Management in Public Services Code of Practice this year, which requires the authority to report on the Treasury Management function on a semi-annual and annual basis. This current report actually outlines the Treasury Management function for the first 6 months of 2021 up to the 30th of September 2020. The 2020-21 strategy was approved by Council on the 26th of February, where the key aim was to keep investments short-term and to use balances to fund the capital programme due to low investment returns and high counterparty risks. All funds so far this year have been kept in call accounts, no discounts and money market funds, so very short-term. A list of investments as at the 30th of September 2020 can be found in Appendix A. Total investments were 10.43 million at that point in time. At the start of the year, we started off with 11.025 million. We've also got borrowing outstanding as at the 30th of September, which is also in Appendix A. This is £9 million, all short-term funding from other local authorities. This is likely it's going to increase as the year goes on due to the capital programme escalating. The Council is currently reviewing its option to lock in longer term funding. However, we are hoping that the results of the PWLB consultation will be published very soon, as it appears that the rates for these are likely to fall. However, there may be some restrictions on certain projects that we'll be able to borrow for. But in the meantime, there is still a large amount of very cheap short-term borrowing currently available, which we're making good use of. Appendix B shows a list of all our treasury and prudential indicators, and so far this year there has been no breaches to report, as you can see from the indicators. That's it for me. I'm just happy to take any questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, has anyone got any questions?
Sorry, stumbling for my mouse. Could I just ask one question, please, Chair?
Go for it.
You say short-term borrowing. What is your difference between short-term or longer-term, John?
Yes, yeah.
Councillor Cox. Yes, short-term borrowing is anything less than 1 year. Yes, yeah. Anything over 1 year is classed as long-term.
Okay, so you're saying we're taking advantage of short-term. Is that sort of like a bridging loan and things like that then, where we move money around?
Yes, we're just using short-term borrowing just to help fund the capital programme initially. However, we are looking to sort of maybe lock in some longer-term rates to coincide with like lengths of projects and things within the capital programme. So just to move away from the refinancing risk of what short-term borrowing entails. So.
Yeah, because look at the investments. It'd be better, really, to be paying ourselves back with the money that we got invested, if you see what I mean, or spreading it. That's what you're really doing, isn't it? You're spreading the risk, I suppose, doing what you're doing at the moment. But,
that's right. Yes.
As we do look at the longer term borrowing for the capital projects, I don't have this. I don't share this drunken sailor on leave approach that is bandied about at the moment. But I think where we are looking at the capital, it certainly is something that we should look to lock in quite soon, because as the government make up their mind about what is or isn't good for us to invest in or to take part in, because at the beginning of all this, they were very much encouraging us to be entrepreneurial and to invest in things, only to decide they would change that idea on a more broad scale. And I hope we're going to be looking at some borrowing soon when the appropriate projects come forward. But thank you very much for letting me know what short term is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, this is it's a good report, and it's in line with what we've agreed, and it's spot on, I think. So I'd like to move that we approve the recommendations on page 36, which is basically to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perry, can I take it that you're proposing those recommendations?
Yes, I am indeed, yes. Yes.
Super.
Happy
Thank
to
you.
second.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Cole.
Sorry, just to interrupt. That second recommendation actually is for decision. It's not for noting. So there's two parts to it.
I think Councillor Perry was doing both.
I was doing both, yeah.
I'm happy to.
Yes, it's fine.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Councillor Cooling, do you want to quickly come in with a question?
That should be as quick as I can. Appendix A, please, if I may. And I think Councillor Cox has already alluded to this. I'm slightly puzzled why we have roughly a balance between investments and borrowing. Is that just because we're worried about the uncertainties of relying on short-term borrowing, as Northern Rock did years ago? So I'm slightly puzzled why we're not liquidating investments to save borrowing. And secondly, on the borrowing on the borrowing table, I note that it's a slight outlier with the North Yorkshire County Council. I know it's not exactly a huge sum of money, but 0.97%, which is vastly different to what we're apparently getting or we're paying elsewhere. So the two tables, by the sound of it, especially if PWLB is going to bring its 2.5% longer term down, presumably, as again I think Councillor Cox said, presumably you're going to move to locking in requirements through longer term borrowing pretty rapidly. Is that the strategy?
Hello, Councillor Cooley. I'll just answer your question about the investments. Investments fluctuate very much throughout the month. At this point in time, they're actually on the up. So what happens is we get all the council tax money during the month, business rates, and then we pay out the business rates to government, KCC, and also the council tax presets as well, which sort of almost clears us out. So it's like a roller coaster throughout the month. We do have a little buffer to sort of coincide with things like the capital programme and other sort of expenditure type things that sort of come up. But yes, that balance does come right down, and that's our strategy, is to use our cash balances where we can. In relation to the 0.97 from North Yorkshire, at that point in time, November 2019, anything under 1% for 364 days was an incredible rate. So that's why we locked it in at that point. That was to coincide with the purchase of the Lock Meadow Leisure Complex. But that is as you see, end of this week, that actually comes off there. We've actually rolled it over initially for another 6 months. But we've rolled it over 0.12. However, we will be looking at putting in place some longer term funding very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daly, did you want to come in?
Well, Madam Chair, I just wanted to make a short comment, actually. Looking at the short-term investments and things that are being done on our behalf, I would like to congratulate anybody that's getting the rates that they are returning for money which is put into short-term investment. Speaking personally, I've been very upset recently. I had nearly £5,000. I didn't know really what to do, so I put it into a savings account with the NatWest Bank. I've just had a statement this week telling me that they've just put interest onto my account of 4p. I found that was very relieving. I feel very much better for it. I can't imagine. It probably cost them £25 just to put 4p on my account.
Well, to let you know.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Dreadful. I mean, just terrible.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Perhaps I could interest you in some gold, Dan.
Thank you, members.
That's wonderful.
I've got some gold and it's not in my teeth.
Thank you, members. Turning then to page 36, we've already had the report proposed and seconded. You've got 2 recommendations. The first to note, the second for decision. Members, do you agree with the 2 recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent. Thank you. Turning now then to agenda item 15, the external audit update from November 2020. This is on page 46. And I call upon Ellie Dunnett, Head of Finance, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is actually a report of our external auditors. It's not my report. So if I can hand over to them to present that, I will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Chair. So this is our audit findings report in relation to the audit of 2019-20. You will have seen previous versions of this at the last 2 audit committees, so we've just been updating it as the audit's ongoing. The key differences to the previous version, just to draw to your attention, is we had completed our work on the property, plant and equipment valuations by the time this was produced, and we're happy to report that we have no further issues or anything further to report then on that. And if you look at page 4 of our report, which is page 53 of the report pack, and we just note there the items that were outstanding at the time this report was produced. I can report now that the assurance letter from the Kent Pension Fund auditor has since been received, and we have no further work to complete on that. That provided the sufficient assurance for us to be happy with that. So I'm happy to take any questions on the rest of the report. And the second report that we're presenting tonight is just our update and progress report, which starts at page 80 of your packs. And this just brings to your attention some key issues that are coming up in the year ahead and that we think you should be aware of. And I'm just happy to take any questions on those as well.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions?
Madam Chairman, can I just ask a quick question? I see on page 58 a very comprehensive action points actually on the pension fund net liability, and I hear that the assurance has now come through from the Kent Pension Fund auditor, which is great. Are there going to be answers to these action points that we can see in due course?
So page 58 of the report, that summarised the work that we have undertaken in relation to the risk that we identified. And our conclusion there was obviously at that time we couldn't conclude on them, just pending the assurance letter, which we've now received, so we can conclude. So that just summarises the work that we have performed in order to get the assurance. So we
okay, and you'll be updating a report in the next few weeks, will you?
We can provide an updated audit findings report, and we will be producing an annual audit letter which summarises the final position to conclude on each point.
Yes, the answers to your points, basically, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, we'll give the overall conclusion that we are happy we've got sufficient assurance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, on page 61, there's a thing about life expectancy, which looks as though it's going up, whereas I'm sure I've read recently that naturally life expectancy is now reducing for the first time in decades. So has this been taken into account? So that's that question. Then on page 63, the auditor's report, page 14, the very first item there, maths in relation to fraud, it says we've not been made aware of any other instance in the period. So this implies that there may have been some incidents. So have I misread it, or does the word other just need to be deleted? And then on the same page, we've got the word GUP. I think they just mean up. So just a few little things for now. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, on page 61, the life expectancies included there are as assessed by the actuary, Barnett Waddingham, which we then review, and that's where we also use PwC as an auditor's expert to help us review and assess those assumptions. So that's kind of the source for those. In terms of your second point, yes, we haven't been aware. The word any other, that should be amended, so just be any instance.
Okay, as I thought. And also in the bit about confirmation requests from third parties, it's got the word GUP. I think we just mean up. So sorry to be picky, but you know, we are the standards committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll amend that in the next version, in the next iteration. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are there any other questions? No, in that case then we turn to the two recommendations on page 46. Both recommendations are for noting. Members, are they noted?
Sorry, Chair, just before we do that, on our page 67, they're page 18, we've got medium-term financial plan has been abbreviated to MTFS. Now, should that be MTFP, or should the word plan be strategy? Again, it sounds a bit picky. And then on the same page, the penultimate paragraph, it says, we revenue which you plan. I'm quite sure what that actually means. So that needs looking at as well, I think. Thank you.
Tina, can we leave those with you to update for the next version, please?
Yes, I'll go through and just double check for any typos in the next version.
Excellent, thank you. Members, as we were before, we were agreeing the recommendations on page 46. Members, I think there are a couple that came back, but just to confirm, are the recommendations noted?
Noted.
Can we also rent out Councillor Atkinson as a copyright and checking facility for Grant Thornton? Very reasonable rates. We're just 20% reduction. It'll be fine in their charge, and you can take a couple of weeks off, Keith. Have a read through their documents. It'll be great.
I'd be very
Thank
happy
you,
with
jolly
that.
good, excellent.
On to item 16 now, members. This is the final item. It's the Budget Strategy Risk Assessment Update. It is on page 91, and I call upon Mark Green, Director of Finance and Business Improvement, to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the usual report that I bring to the committee, setting out our assessment of the budget risks that we face. And as in the last couple of reports, the main challenge is the financial impact of COVID-19. And this has led to a very significant overspend in the current financial year. And as the report explains, we have had government support to help address that. But on the current figures, that still won't be enough to cover all of the additional expenditure and loss of income that we face. Now, Maidstone Council is relatively fortunate in that we do have reserves that we can draw on to fund that shortfall. You would have heard about other authorities that are really very challenged, and London Borough of Croydon, for example, has had to issue a Section 114 notice. We're not in that situation. As a lower tier authority, not responsible for adult social care, we're not in that kind of position. And the reserves that we hold should, on current estimates, be perfectly adequate to cover the likely overspend this year. But of course, as you all know, and has been reinforced by the latest resurgence of COVID-19, this is going to have an ongoing impact, and we're currently looking at how we fill a budget gap for next year, which is looking like 2 or 3 million at the moment, and there will be a report going to Policy and Resources Committee next week, which is addressing that. So the problem isn't just this year, but the position for next year. And so far as the overall position on the risks is concerned, because of the fact that the position isn't getting any better, if anything, it's getting worse, I have downgraded some of the risks or given a higher rating to some of the risks, and that's set out on page 96. The things that I've put on there as being increased risks are the things that really keep me awake at night, and probably should keep councillors awake at night too, because as a district council, we're very dependent on the money that we raise ourselves, whether from council tax and business rates or fees and charges or commercial income. And the risk is that those sources of income don't actually hold up. So I've increased the risk levels on all three of those, fees and charges, commercial income, council tax and business rates. And it's really to send the signal that we need to watch those very carefully, do everything that we can to collect money that's due to us, but recognise that we're in a very difficult economic environment, and so many people will struggle to pay. And some of the sources of income from things like parking, if people aren't visiting the town centre, that income just disappears completely. Parking income that we lose, we'll never get that back until people start coming into to Maidstone to shop and work in the same way as they were doing pre-COVID-19. So I'm afraid it's rather a bleak position to present, but the merits of having a report like this is that it flags up the risks and focuses our minds on the things we need to do to mitigate those. So I'll leave it at that, but obviously very happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooley, I can see you're writing. Do you want to jump straight into the question?
Goodness me, I have a spy in my study, do I? Yes, please. Thank you very much. Mark, as usual, thank you very much indeed. Two, if I may. First question is about paragraph 2.7 to 2.9. Can I just check, and this is my ignorance showing, as far as the budget gap is concerned, i.e. that which will focus your mind or the members' mind in terms of cost savings, does the in-year revenue costs of capital spending have an impact in that. I don't mean the interest costs, but what I would call depreciation. So is revenue gap just looking at cash, in essence, or is it what I would call a full account?
No, there is a revenue impact from capital expenditure, as you say, Councillor Cooling, which is in two parts. One is the cost of borrowing, the other is the provision that we make for repayment of borrowing. Now, actually, that mitigates our losses to an extent, because what's happened this year is some of our capital expenditure has been deferred. And also borrowing costs have been lower than anticipated. So actually that has reduced our losses to some extent. I mean, the capital programme is still going to be delivered, but it's going to be delivered over a longer period of time. And there've been a number of schemes that we've deliberately pushed back to ease the pressure on the revenue budget.
May I continue, Chair?
Of course.
Yes. Then, Mark, if I may, onto the risk matrix and onto the chart of budget risks. That's our page 98 and our page 100. I've obviously looked back to the previous version of this, which this committee saw back in August. A fairly dramatic change, and understand why. But when I look at page 100, and all of these figures are wrong. Let's be absolutely clear. These figures are wrong. The assessment, the monetized assessment is wrong, but it's the best thing we've got. And I look at the black top three, and in fact, compared to last time, they've got about 20% worse, of that order, 20% worse. Whereas, for instance, the fourth one down in that horizontal bar chart, commercialization fails to deliver additional income, that is ×5 compared to last time. So I would have thought it's the relativity, the change over the past 3 months that we should be driven by. I understand why in the matrix we have all the blacks now about fees and charges, council tax collection and COVID. But in terms of relative change over the last 3 months, I would have thought the worry would not only be those three, but would be elsewhere. And so these charts are useful, but it's the interpretation of them and the management actions that should come about. I've only spotted one at the moment, but certainly we should be worrying about this change in commercialization fails. And if that's because we've pulled back on a few capital projects, maybe given the borrowing costs, maybe we shouldn't do that. But I just raised the interpretation of these, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cooling. I'm glad you've highlighted that. I mean, certainly it was the intention by reviewing those risk assessments to show that the position is, if anything, getting worse. Because I mean, 3 or 4 months ago, we might have expected a gradual recovery from COVID-19. It looks as though the recovery will be somewhat slower now. I mean, hopefully what you're saying is that the assessment does a lot of illustrating the problem, but as you say, I mean, it's a bit of a rough and ready estimate. I mean, none of these figures is going to be accurate. They're just kind of highlighting where we think the risks will be, and obviously if there are other risks that members think we should be giving more attention to, I'd be very happy to hear about that.
If I may just come back on that, I think my main point was fully understand the blacks, the black picture, it has got worse, absolutely agreed, but we shouldn't get blinded by just those that are in the black now. We should be looking at the relative changes in the others and whether that actually warrants members' management attention. And while I've got the microphone, you asked for extra risks. I mentioned waste services earlier on, but should there be a major contractor failure, and it's difficult to quantify that as a risk, but boy, that would be a major upset for the borough if one of your major contractors went belly up.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Councillor Cooling, and funny enough, that one about major contractor failure is something that we're now putting on the corporate risk register, and I think that'll probably be mirrored in the budget risk register, because although our contractors are organisations like Serco and BIFA, I mean the current situation is one where we need to kind of keep an eye on all of our contractors.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Oh, thank you. Well, Councillor Cooling has pretty well said it, actually, but I wanted to come back in because particularly on the matrix, which I find really is a useful thing to have in front of you. And the one that really worried me, and Mark, you talked about losing sleep, councillors losing sleep, and I think that item C, which now is in the red high risk, is one that I think could really lose me some sleep, actually, because I think that one is extremely risky. And I think Councillor Cooling has already mentioned it, but I think it's something. I mean, there's an element of subjectivity in here. I do realise that, but I think some of the items that are in the higher risk, particularly at the top end, the likelihood end, then I think that's something we need to really watch very, very closely. And they could end up going into the black area very quickly, I would think. So I'm happy to go along with the recommendations as it stands, but I think we need to we are monitoring this very closely, I know, but we must continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too would like to say that Peter has covered a lot of points, but I really would stress that I hope all councillors look at this budget strategy risk grid, whatever you want to call it, because the planned savings are not delivered at point D is only in an amber risk, but being very current and on point. If things that are projected to give us the savings are scuppered or are changed, and without the knowledge of really what the cause and effect is by doing that action, it could very easily bring us into peril. And I think it's important that we all are made aware of this and also the other risks that we see on this grid, because this isn't something to tamper with. It is, some of these things are knife edge, and dependent on what the government comes up as a settlement for us as we get towards December, will make the difference between whether we have to go into our reserves even more, or there are, as has been mentioned here, other district councils that are teetering on the edge. I was in a webinar where I heard one council say, we've got a year left. A year. And then you hear members of government say, I think next Christmas could be a more normal Christmas. This is long haul. The savings that we have to find are not just for this year, next year. I believe Mark knows, that there are probably 3 years of savings that we have to look at, because we don't want to push out all our reserves in one go. We need to gradually let them go. It is very important that we all, that is staff, that is councillors, that is parish councillors, look at everything they spend. And you do differentiate between revenue and capital, but people need to understand that to be able to understand a budget strategy, and indeed linked hand in hand with that are the budget strategy risks. Please take this to your groups, show them it is not something for messing around with to score points. Thank you.
Absolutely agree with you, Martin. Absolutely.
Chair.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Cooling, please come back in.
I think Councillor Cox is that really is the siren call. Well done. But I wonder, looking from the outside, my impression is that Maidstone Borough Council has done a damn good job over the past several years in making the pips squeak. And I just wonder whether knocking more pips out of the system, whether residents would really want that. I know if you ask a resident, would you like to pay more or less council tax? I think I know what the answer is. But perhaps you haven't got many more pips to knock out. And if you cannot long-term reduce rates, if you don't want to generate more revenue activity, then I'm sorry, I do not know what the government's going to come out as a council tax ceiling. But I would suggest that you need to hit that ceiling well and truly, and maybe go beyond it for a year or so, explaining to residents what the corollary of, what the outcome of not doing that would be in terms of a pip too much going out of the system.
Councillor Cox, do you want to come back in?
If I may, and it's not really to come back, I think but I will add to this. I believe you're going to find government quite soon coming back with a way of raising the money that has been thrown out during this last year, trillions of pounds. We're going to have to put it back into the system just the same way as John and myself and Mark and others are concerned that we should build back our reserves. If we hadn't had such prudent direction from our directors, we would not be in this situation, and it would be me saying we need 114 or we have 1 year left. We aren't in that situation at the moment, but we must be careful about how we guide the ship, and we must do it together. I've said that from day one when I was given this position. We need to check we're all pulling in the same direction, and I don't want to look behind me and see people drilling the holes. That's really, Peter is saying fact, John is saying this, and so am I. And from this committee, we need to send that signal out, because this is the check and balance committee.
It is, yep.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your time this evening as well.
Yep, yep.
Thank you, members. Members, are there any other questions or comments on this particular agenda item?
Yes, Chairman, may I?
Go for it.
You've heard the expression, no man is an island. Well, no council is an island either. And where we sit at the moment is in a country which is almost itself bankrupt. Not because of madness here, but madness in the world, generally speaking. So we are part of the whole. And the unfortunate thing for us is that whilst we may very well take the steps which are prudent, that we are going to be governed in many ways by things external to us. And Peter Cooling is quite right in saying that, we're taking everything as we can and doing the best we can. And Martin Cox has put it very, very bluntly that we have been as prudent as anybody could possibly be in these last 4 or 5 years. But coming back to what Peter Cooling had earlier said, was he didn't seem to think that we're going to suffer very much from Brexit. Well, I have to say I differ from that very, very seriously, because I think the way things are going at the moment is we're going to leave we've already left the EU, but we're going to leave that and the customs union at the end of January without any deal, and we're going to be actually in very, very serious trouble as a country in the very near future. Because I've said this before in this committee, all of our predications forward are based on sort of holding inflation at a fairly low rate. I've got a horrible feeling that inflation is going to tear away next year, and it might very well be 5% or even more, which is going to throw some of our budget forecasts way out of kilter. Now, this page 95 of our papers today set it out quite clearly in 212. It says, this will affect the council in 2 ways. Directly, owing to a disruption at the Channel ports, for example, having a knock-on effect in the rest of Kent. We're part of this. As I started off by saying, we're not an island. We're an island in a bigger island, and that island is already in serious trouble. I mean, we can't help this. Added to which, of course, Convid, is just the final straw. And that may very well come back in spades later on in the year. We don't know. It might be added to by influenza. We don't know. These risks are external to us. We do what we can to maintain an equilibrium and make sure that our boat floats. Yes, but it's in a very, very stormy sea. And it may very well be that we're going to find that the water's coming over the gunnels and we can't do very much about it. So I'm sorry to be such a misery, but I do really think that there are things here which are external to us, which may very well mean that we cannot, whatever we do, dodge the influences which are not put about by anything to do with us, but because the failure of either government or failure of other people to make sure that we have a very, very clear and very easy or easier exit from Europe than the one that we're going to be faced with probably after January. So I'm sorry, Peter Cooling, you were a bit short earlier on to say that you didn't think there'd be any problem with Brexit. I have to differ. I think that there's going to be some serious disruption, and I think Kent is going to be very badly affected. But this country, if they read the papers today, now that the Chancellor's looking to scrub money from any particular way, don't we already pay enough council road tax, fuel tax, God knows, and now he wants to lower it on top of that to pay for we can walk, any road that we want to drive on, we've got to pay extra to. I just find the whole thing is bizarre. But I'm saying this again, I think that whatever we've done, which is prudent, and we must hold to that line, but it's going to be affected by external things we just cannot control. So I'm sorry to be such a misery, Chairman, but that is how I feel.
Well, when we next meet, it'll be very interesting then, won't it?
Other views are available. No, I'm only jesting, Dan. Thank you for your words.
Peter, I hope that we both have a dark room and sensory music.
Could someone stop the world? I want to get off. Yeah.
Thank you, members. Turning then to page 91, we've got one recommendation for this particular agenda item, and that is to note. Members, is that noted?
It's noted.
It's noted.
Noted.
Thank you, members. In that case then, I thank you for your time this evening, and I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you,
everyone. Safe journey home, everyone.
Safe journey, everybody.